One of the gambits I've been working on online and getting away with it is Jerome Gambit. Considered probably one of the worst gambits, but if you don't know the lines, you're not going to win. It's e4, e5, nf3, nc6, bishop c4, bishop c5. Now b4 is the Evans Gambit, but the Jerome Gambit is bishop takes pawn at f7. If you know the lines and familiar with it, there's lots of traps with it. Otherwise, you could fail and lose quickly with that. At this point, best is king takes at f7. Now, I used to play d4, but it's probably been busted, and I lose more games than I win with that. So what I now play is knight takes pawn check, and then after the knight takes, I go queen h5 check. Now the king's got lots of places to go, or he can try to push the pawn on in front. Queen will take the knight. The king usually goes to king e6, although there are other cases where maybe the king will go to f8, and white will take the knight on e5. So that prevents the knight being taken right away. So at this point, white then plays f4, trying to kick back that knight. Once the knight goes away, this queen can grab this bishop. So after f4 is played, something like d6, giving up the pawn no matter what, giving up the piece no matter what. After pawn takes knight, pawn takes pawn. White can try queen h3. King will move to e7. Now the queen's in danger with this. And that's the type of opening you get, queen g3, to get out of trouble. So after f4, strong is queen f6. That holds a lot. At this point with this, instead of castling, which you really can't do because the bishop is on the g1 square, rook f1 is played, and these three pawns here are usually known as the Jerome pawns, and they attack. And a lot of these games are on Rook Kennedy's site on the Jerome Gambit page with that, so I submit my games if I think it's good enough to him, and they get published on his page. So with rook to f1, the knight could move, or he could do counterplay. He could attack my queen with g6. I could check him. King would then go to e7, and I take the knight. Queen takes a pawn with this, and he's probably better off with this. Pretty good. Where am I going to go? Maybe queen f3, trying to go down this way with this, but knight f6, quick development. Black is ahead in development, and white has lost all of his counterplay. So that's one idea. The other idea is playing d6 as black, and after pawn takes knight, queen goes d6, wants to trade the queens. White avoids that with queen e2, king e7. If I go pawn takes pawn, and white really doesn't have anything else, maybe nc3. Black has very good development and up in material with nf6. So instead of that, after this move, the knight goes to g6. White can take the bishop now. Queen takes at c5. Now, perhaps best right now is something like king f7. And if I push the pawn on f5, I do have to worry about a check. Rook can go f2. The knight gets out of the pin with knight to g to e7. White can probably develop knight to c3. Queen takes the pawn at h2 and is probably winning. However, black thinks he can get away with just queen h4, and that's a losing move. After queen h4 check, simply g3. Now what do you do? So if queen goes to g4, white plays f5, attacking the king. King goes to f6. White develops at knight c3, and then if black plays something like h5 to get room to run, knight to d5 check, king f7, pawn takes knight, wins a piece, and check, and that's a good game with this. So moving the queen isn't any good with that. So is there any other ideas with this? Queen coming to h3 is possible, but again, f5, the king's in check, king f7, pawn takes knight, discovered attack or double check with the pawn and the rook. King will take the pawn on g6. Queen then goes to f8 with mating attack. Queen e6 on that holds everything with this. And then Mark can play knight c3. Now he's ahead in development with a bunch of threats. h6 trying to get escape route, d3 on white is ahead in this game. So again, after The other possibility, which is queen takes pawn, the game is over with f5 check. If the king tries to go to f6, which we saw before, pawn takes knight check, king takes a pawn, queen f5 check, king in a corner, d3 check, g5, queen takes pawn, mate. So that can't be good. So the only other alternative is play king f7. Well, that wins after pawn takes knight, double check. If the king goes to e8, it's checkmate right away. If the king goes to e6, queen to d5, king e7, queen to e5 check, king d8, rook f8 checkmate. So what was played in the game was king takes pawn, but then that again leads to mate after queen to f5 check, king h6, d3, g5, queen g5. Nice trap in the Jerome Gambit.